Hi, this is Tim Ashe, President of the Vermont State Senate and candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Vermont. In the next 5 minutes, I am going to endeavor to relate to you all the ways in which the legislature, working with the governor and his team, have allocated federal relief funds so we can get our economy back on track, stabilize our healthcare system, and many other things that are in desperate need of support as a result of the damage that's been inflicted by COVID-19. The legislative session ended just a few nights ago, and so I'm giving this to you hot off the press, and I'm going to move in less than 5 minutes. So all of the totals that you see here are amounts that have been allocated through legislation in order to support the Vermont economy and get us back on our feet. And I'm going to go through each one with a quick description of what it's about. The top line item says micro business through CAPS. This is small businesses, the very smallest businesses in Vermont who desperately need support. And the CAP agencies are community action agencies who work with micro businesses to get them started, 1.4 million. The second line right here says VHCB assistance to farm and food businesses. The Vermont Housing Conservation Board has a program that supports agricultural-based businesses, and this will provide technical assistance to help them get back on their feet. Next, you can see two substantial slices of funding here, $25 million to support the dairy industry, both dairy farmers themselves and the people who process their milk like cheesemakers. $5 million additionally goes to other agricultural producers, whether it's meat or vegetables. Next up, $5 million in grants to wood products and forestry businesses who have been particularly hard hit as the market for their products have just disappeared. $500,000 for the agricultural fairs. This may seem like a small amount, but will stretch very far for our fairs, all of which had to cancel their fairs for the year. $1 million was initially appropriated, then another $2.5 million to what we call the Working Lands Grants. These are direct investments in businesses that are trying to come up with new lines of activity so that they can grow. This is a good investment moving forward. $70 million for tax and ACCD business grants. This was the first slice of funding that we dedicated to help give direct grants to businesses and organizations throughout the state. The state agencies are right now coming up with the guidelines for how that money will be distributed, but that stands out as the first big sum of money here. Next, you'll see what we passed this past Friday night, another $82 million in the same kinds of grants. So combined, $152 million in direct grants to any business or organization who qualifies and applies to get money out the door. Importantly, these are all grants, not loans. Another $5 million in grants to businesses who have business with the Vermont Community Loan Fund. $1.5 million to support outdoor recreation grants to businesses who need the money to help bolster the enthusiasm for the services they offer or the products that they sell. $5 million for the Vermont Arts Council to subgrant out to community arts organizations, everything from the Paramount Theater to Catamount Arts to the Latches down in Brattleboro. This $5 million to the arts is desperately needed by organizations who have effectively lost all their revenue streams, and our communities would not be the same without them. And then $15 million to support local governments who have taken on a great number of new costs as a result of COVID-19. That might have been emergency responder overtime. It could have been equipment to make facilities safe for the public or for the staff. And of course, we have more than a couple hundred municipalities. So this money, while it's a big amount, is going to get stretched thin fast. Next, under technical and marketing assistance, this is a area where we're trying to both help people get through this hard time and build for the future. So the business portal that's described here will allow businesses to have a one-stop experience when they're incorporating or changing legal documents so that it all gets done in one simple manner and you don't have to jump from agency to agency. This is an investment we've been waiting to make for several years. The UVM Business Center is an attempt to have our flagship state university be more closely connected with private and nonprofit sector players outside the university campus to make sure that we're drawing on as much expertise up there as possible and commercializing as much of the intellectual property that comes off the university as possible. $2.5 million for direct marketing support to businesses. We know that many businesses, their marketing budgets have disappeared, as have all their other revenues. This is to try to help regenerate the demand for Vermont business offerings. And then $2.5 million in what's called restart technical support. Many businesses do not have consultants lying around to help them figure out what to do next in light of the real gut punch their businesses have taken. This will provide technical assistance support to businesses throughout the state who need it. Under housing assistance, you'll see $23 million to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board in grants, and then another $9 million that we just passed Friday. That $32 million is a massive investment to try to permanently address the issue of homelessness by purchasing properties, fixing them up so that we have a safe transitional venue for people who are either suffering from homelessness or at risk of it, to get them back on their feet and self-sufficient again. $550,000 to Vermont Legal Aid to help support people who don't have much money and who have to navigate difficult issues in terms of being able to pay rent and all of the other stuff. Counseling assistance to landlords. There's two sides to the housing ledger, and they're both struggling mightily right now. That's important support for them. $5 million here for foreclosure protection to make sure that homeowners don't wind up out of their house because of shocks to their jobs. And $25 million to help prevent people from being evicted from their homes who are renters. We know renters and low-income people are particularly vulnerable to the effects of COVID. The remaining $22 million or so is money being used to create permanent solutions to Vermont households who work and interact with the Agency of Human Services because they need support to get by. This is meant to provide the pathway to self-sufficiency that may have eluded them in the past and represents a substantial amount of cooperation between the governor and the legislature. The next category, you'll see PSD Connectivity. The shorthand for that is $20 million to support broadband build out in the pockets of the state that don't have it. We hope we can get this money out the door by the end of the calendar year when all this money has to be spent. So if you're in a community that's desperately in need of high-speed internet, these funds were specifically put there to make sure we meet your short-term needs in terms of distance learning, in terms of being able to work from home, have healthcare visits from home, and at the same time, they create infrastructure for the long term. $8 million for ratepayer arrearages to make sure that all of us don't see sticker shock in terms of our electric rates because so many people are going to be unable to pay their bills. And then the remaining $2.2 million are really making sure that we have proper cybersecurity measures in place moving forward. And then wrapping up on the healthcare side, this is no small number. You'll see first, $275 million in what's called healthcare stabilization funds. That is direct payments to healthcare providers throughout the state to make sure that they can stay afloat. That's hospitals, mental health facilities, dentists, counselors, physical therapists, you name it, they're all in there because many of them have been ordered to close effectively for 3 months. That 275 is in addition to the 58 that had already been spent for the exact same purpose. An additional $5.5 million was for some specialty agencies that were forced to close entirely and will actually go out of business altogether if we don't provide this much needed infusion of cash. $28 million, making us the second state in America to provide essential worker grants to people who work in the healthcare and human services fields who were required to work during that particularly tense period from the date the state of emergency was passed or put into effect on March 13th for the next 2 months. Grants of up to $2,000 per person for full-time workers, and it's $1,200 per person for part-time workers. Skipping down to food security, $4.7 million for the Vermont Food Bank. We know, we've all seen the pictures of the lines. This will help them continue to meet people's food needs into the fall and hopefully to the other side of this thing. $5 million for an exciting program that restaurants throughout the state have pioneered, where they are making effectively at-cost prepared meals to be distributed at food sites for people who need it. Skinny Pancake in the Burlington area, which has sites throughout the state now, was one of the leaders in that. And this will be managed by an organization that is in Windham County. And then $12 million for school summer meals. We know that our schools have been a primary player in meeting people's nutrition needs, especially for kids during COVID-19. That hunger doesn't go away in the summer, so that's 12 million more. Down the next category, childcare, family supports, and vulnerable populations, 12 million broadly to support childcare and getting back on their feet. Vulnerable populations, this $2 million represents money that might go for older Vermonters who need Meals on Wheels and a variety of other categories of Vermonters who are isolated and need special assistance, and $700,000 to meet the needs of new Americans. We know that we have not seen the proactivity and outreach and communication about the risks of COVID, and this helps bridge the gap that has existed prior to now. And then the last piece, 3.75, effectively making sure that state facilities are safe for people to interact with. 3 million specifically for state lands, where people will be going all summer and fall and making sure that the facilities are safe. And then 750,000 for the State House, which is one of the most visited facilities in the state, especially by tourists. So more important than people may at first realize. So I have just walked through a substantial amount of money in a short period of time. That represents about $700 million in spending that we voted on Friday. And that is not the end of the story. We have set aside a small portion of the federal money so that we can use it for things like helping schools reopen safely and meet other particular business needs as they emerge, and we have a better picture throughout the summer. So I've been speaking fast. I took longer than 5 minutes, but this is where the legislature, working with the governor, decided to allocate substantial funds. The big takeaway from my point of view is that direct grants to businesses and organizations who are suffering badly is where the bulk of the money went, as well as to healthcare providers in the broadest definition, who were told they had to basically shut down all of their activities. They have lost all the revenue streams for an extended period of time, and we need them to be up and running and healthy in order for the public to be healthy. So I'm going to sign off for now, and I'll see you next time. This message is paid for by Tim Ashe for Lieutenant Governor, Treasurer Jane Kitchel.